Hello, welcome to the This Is Not Therapy Hour. Brandon will be in a couple minutes, but I wanted to start. So this is not therapy for so many reasons. My name is Caitlin Miller. I'm a therapist here. A few things to keep in mind is this stream is an open conversation. So if you're here, you're welcome to chat. It doesn't have to be on topic. You can interrupt with any questions you have, and we're happy to get your thoughts and respond to you. We work at a practice called Effective Artistry, which currently has an office location in Northbrook, Illinois. And we're a therapy practice. We currently offer group therapy, couples therapy, and individual therapy, and family therapy. We're developing some groups. And if you're interested in working with us, you're welcome to drop us a line on our website, effectiveartistry.com. Keep in mind that this is a public video, and we have it on video as demand after the stream finishes. So it will be available for others to watch. So it is not private, other than your screen name being anonymous, your username being anonymous. So yeah, those are a few things to keep in mind. And if you want to drop in any comments, you're welcome to, and I will wait for Brandon to come in to start the stream. I can hear him. I have started it. I did it.
Keep going. I need to fill up my water bottle real quick.
Brandon is filling up his water bottle.
Running late.
Yeah.
No, I already filled it up.
Oh my gosh. Wow. What a beautiful world. I did the intro.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah.
Good to be here with you, Caitlin, and
good to be here with you.
With all of you hypothetical, lovely people.
Super lovely and super hypothetical.
Well, since they're hypothetical, I can make them exactly as lovely as I imagine they would be. And anyone who would come to this stream is a very lovely person.
So lovely.
In my mind.
Yeah.
You're like halfway off the screen there. It's a very strange placement of the ottoman, too, between us. Looks like it's
like it's a divide.
Sorry. Didn't want it there like that.
I haven't done this in a bit. Okay.
Yeah.
You didn't introduce yourself. Who are you?
I'm Brandon Tessers. I also work at Effective Artistry with Caitlin Miller.
Yeah.
Oh, let's turn off the TV at the background.
Oh, yeah.
All it's showing is another video feed of us. Yeah.
What is that, Inception or whatever? Where it's like a video of a video. I'm attempting to make a cultural reference.
Have you seen Inception?
Yeah.
It's a great movie.
It is a great movie.
I saw that movie with my wife when we were dating.
Aww.
And at the Logan Theater in Chicago, which was a great little theater. And it was the first time in my life, one exception, effectively the first time in my life where I didn't run out of money before the next paycheck. You know, like I was going to go into, like usually one paycheck lasted, I was living paycheck to paycheck. One paycheck lasted me until like right about the next one, or I'd run out several days before or whatever.
That's so stressful.
And that was the first time in my life I was going to have $200 left in my bank account when the new paycheck came in. And at the Logan Theater, it is also a bar. And so I had a couple drinks, and I lived very close by. So I walked home afterwards and left my car there because I didn't realize that the parking.
Oh, I see where this is going.
In Chicago, every so often they have days where they do a street cleaning, and it's like once a month or once every other month.
I spent so much money in parking tickets when I lived in Chicago.
My car was towed. It cost me $200. So the $200, like the very first time I was like, yes, I will have money in the account when my new paycheck hit, and then immediately lost it. But it's still a good movie, though.
Is that the movie you watched?
Yeah, it's
okay.
That's how the story initially came up.
Oh, Dios mío.
Anyway, what's going on with you?
You're
still a little out of frame. Would it make you feel better if I moved further this way?
I'll be more in frame, fine. I like
And
the
it doesn't need to be a
elusive
huge gap.
nature. I like the elusive nature of being half in the frame.
What's on your mind?
Pottery and artist statements. And I think I don't know.
You think
What
we will?
statement are you trying to make with your art, Caitlin, is the question I'm asking myself.
Oh, is that what you meant by artist statement?
Yeah.
I thought you meant like an actual written out.
Oh, no, not yet.
Because like business statements, that's, when you're starting a business, you're supposed to write a business statement.
Yeah, I know that the most common use of the phrase artist statement is like what you would see in a bio, right? Or like next to a piece or something.
Okay. Well, do you want to talk about any of those things, or is there something else you'd like to talk about to get us started until and unless we have people in the chat taking us in some direction?
Yeah. Sure. So, Brandon, I would like to start with what your definition of art is, and then maybe transition into.
Is this something that I've shared with you before?
You have, and I
you're
have
prompting me to
forgotten.
share? Oh.
Yeah, I've forgotten the specific definition.
I think of art. There's two different ways I will talk about. I think art is this, but to start with, I think art is communication with an unknown other.
Okay.
So to me, communication is anything that a human does with the intent of impacting another human's thoughts, feelings, or behavior, or multiple other humans' thoughts, feelings, and behavior.
Mm-hmm.
Which can sound to people like very manipulative, like all communication is intended to make people do stuff or things that, to be clear, it's not always. In fact, a lot of communication is not a specific intent to impact them in a specific way to get a particular outcome.
Mm-hmm.
But it is an attempt. Like saying hello to a person is not me trying to manipulate you or control your thoughts or whatever. But I am doing that as a way of making you aware of the fact, calling your attention to the fact that I am here and I am acknowledging your presence.
Mm-hmm.
So that's impacting your thoughts. You weren't aware of me being here, or if you were, I don't know that you are, whatever. So that's communication. I'm not big. I don't like the statement people make about all behavior being communication. I think that's not a great statement.
I'm wanting to ask you why, but I feel like that gets us off track of what your definition of art is.
Well, we can come back to it or talk to it and come back to art, whatever. So communication is anything a person does with the intent to impact another person's thoughts, feelings, or behavior.
Mm-hmm.
Another person or group of people. Art specifically then is communication where the other person is not known or determined. You don't know who you're doing something with the intent of impacting a person or people's thoughts, feelings, or behavior, but no particular specific person, just anyone, the public, the audience, whatever.
Does that count if you know the audience will be a certain demographic, but you just don't know the specific people who will be there?
Well, you can have intent on who the other person will be, but if it's intended only for a specific person or group of people, then not that I'm saying that that's not a valuable effort or that I would, if someone else were to say that it's art, that I would be like, no, you're definitely wrong. I just think of art as the point is I'm creating a thing that I have the expectation or the intent that it will be available to be viewed or experienced by others, and it will impact them in some way. Whether I have an idea of some specific others, but not just those others, right? Art is public.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm sure there's lots of stuff that I would consider art that people are like, no, I only want these people to see it. But the point of it is that even if you only want those people to see it, you can't ensure that.
Okay.
Unless I guess you define that, if you're doing a piece of performance art and said it's only meant for the people who are observing it in that place and time, then I guess, yes, you can make it because it only happened in that place and time.
Yeah, but I don't think that's a demographic, unless I guess it could be performance art for a K-12 school.
The other thing that I'll say about art is that, and this is a different usage of the word art, is that to me, the art isn't the piece, It's the interaction between the piece and the audience. So sometimes I'm saying, yes, you're creating art, and we're talking about the piece of art that you have created.
Mm-hmm.
But the value of it, or the thing, if we're talking about art in a different way, then to me what matters is the audience engaging with the piece.
So, okay.
That experience, there's the audience, there's the piece,
Mm-hmm.
the interaction. That interaction is what is the art.
Okay. Now, do you have any tips for creating and developing an artist statement?
Well, I don't know. I don't actually. I'm sure I've heard of that before, but I'm not accessing any memories of that specific.
Oh, I remember us talking about. I don't know if it would count as an artist statement, but like a bio you saw that highlighted like credibility.
Bio, yeah, and I don't want to like be specific, so I don't put somebody on blast. But
well, what about? Okay, then I guess the more. Here we go. Okay, hi Brandon.
Hello.
I am now making pottery pieces with intending to communicate a specific thing. However, I find it difficult to put it into words.
Try. Find it difficult is different than it is impossible to.
It is not impossible.
So try, and if you fail, you still tried.
Artistry.
There was one version of our logo where I tried to have the like.
That's still on some of it.
Isn't it?
Yeah.
Where the art, the IS and the TRY are different colors.
Yeah.
I am big on trying. Just make an attempt. And that's not always true, right? That you evaluate the stakes. Mm-hmm. And there are some things where the stakes of a failed attempt are so high that you do want a high level of certainty of success before you make an attempt. Mm-hmm. But most of the stuff we're talking about, most of the stuff we're talking about in therapy with people, the stakes are high because of how the person feels about a failed attempt, not because of the reality of what happens with a failed attempt. Make a piece of art that everybody sucks, and what actually happens? That everybody thinks sucks. Make a piece of art that everybody else hates. What happens?
They see it once and never see it again, and then they don't take you as a credible artist, and then they never see anything else again, and then you fail.
The thing that happens
part of that was the joke.
Is that they see it and they don't like it, and likely don't ever see it again. Mm-hmm. There are some chance it is theoretically possible that people could, share your art on a wider level in order to mock it and share with other people. But in that case, it's just more people who don't like it. Mm-hmm. It is very, very unlikely, especially for someone who is not already an established and known artist. Mm-hmm. It is very unlikely that if somebody sees your art, doesn't like it, that they will remember who you are and be less open or entirely closed off to seeing any of your art in the future.
I remember you saying that before, and it was so comforting.
Yeah. You see a piece of ceramics that you're like, you just move on. You don't be like, let me remember Caitlin Miller. Remember, if anyone's ever like, hey, Caitlin Miller has some art, don't waste your time looking at it.
Yeah. Don't waste your time.
Right.
Very serious.
The idea there is that in order to save myself whatever resources I would spend in the future engaging with or observing this person's art again, in lieu of that, I'll spend a bunch of resources now committing this person to memory in order to avoid the potential of spending those. That's never a valuable trade-off. It's unlikely I'll ever see anything from you again. Mm-hmm. So it's not worth trying to remember who you are.
Yeah.
And even if I do see something, it's very unlikely I'm actually going to remember who you are, and they'll pop up again easily and quickly enough that I won't have seen your new. When is in the future someone going to be like, hey, I have a piece I'm not showing you yet, but I'm going to tell you it's by Caitlin Miller first before you decide to see it. You just see the piece again.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't even know if it was you unless it interested me.
So here's a question.
Okay.
Today I had someone ask me in my personal life, they were like, why do you use so many snakes in your art? And then I described why, and it took me about 5 minutes, and I was going on, and then by the end of it, I thought, I feel like this isn't concise enough, and I want to like
Did
have.
the other person seem to have a problem with how long your answer was?
They were laughing a little bit because I kind of went into like special interest mode. I don't know how much
Did
they
they have
caught
a problem
of it.
with how long it was?
I don't know.
Did they give you any? Did they do anything? Did you observe anything in them that gives you the impression that they would have preferred that it was a more concise answer?
It seemed to me that they stopped listening after the first couple sentences, but I don't have any like proof.
What did you observe that
They
that you
just
read
kind of
as-
like smiled and looked to the side, and
Did you say they laughed a few times? Didn't
yeah,
they laugh
that's true.
after that moment?
Yeah. Okay.
I don't know. If someone asks me a question and I'm given a 5-minute answer, and which I frequently do, I frequently give longer than that answers. And
Come
I
on,
am,
dude.
And I'm actively paying attention to that other person to see if I have their interest, to see if they're following along with me or whatever. It's not impossible that they would be annoyed and unwilling to tell me or communicate to me in any way that they're not listening. And I also miss it even though I'm watching for it. That is possible. It's pretty unlikely though. It's a lot more likely that I would get nervous about my answer going on too long for my own reasons and thinking about other situations in the future, not because this person is actually not interested or following along.
I think I have a real question now, or another question. This is helpful. Thank
Okay.
you. My next question is that I think the language I use around describing what I'm trying to communicate in art sounds pretentious. And also, I kind of just want people to experience, and instead of asking me like what I meant by it, to say, well, what did you get from it? But then if I'm trying to communicate.
Couldn't that also be seen as pretentious though?
Yeah.
If someone's like, what did you intend by it? And you're like, what did you get from it? Couldn't they also be like, I asked you a question, don't be so pretentious. Also, think about artists as a group and the idea of being pretentious. Like, why would you be concerned that in answering a question about your art, you might sound pretentious? Where did you get this idea that talking about your art and sounding pretentious might be connected?
I watched a YouTube video of a Canadian acrylic artist talk about selling at an art fair next to like a buddy of his, and he said to avoid sounding pretentious, he and his buddy would switch booths, and then they would talk about each other's art, and they would notice that they would both sell more because they would be like, yeah, this is my friend's Tim's painting, and isn't it amazing, and blah blah blah. And he was giving that and he like trains people to like be artists and or like to sell art, not to be artists, but to sell out. And he said that he likes to talk about his art using stories because he thinks that they sound less pretentious, but that they're still like gripping. And I feel like the language I use is really just like flowery. Like it's like flower, 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 flower.
Okay, first of all, pretentious, like funny, like appealing, attractive, all these things. That is a word that describes the way a person perceives a thing. It's not a word that describes an element or a characteristic of the thing. There is no such thing as saying something that is pretentious. You can say something that people think of or perceive as being pretentious, and certainly we could talk about the way you're saying that is very likely that people will interpret it as pretentious.
Mm-hmm.
That still doesn't mean it is. Also, people who drop a lot of money on art, do you think of them as people who like to speak in ways that others see as pretentious about the art that they buy? Here's another theory.
So maybe I'm just finding new friends.
Maybe. Here's an alternate theory about why.
Do you know that I have so many friends?
Good for you. An alternate theory about why they had more luck selling things when they sold each other's.
Yeah.
As opposed to sounding pretentious, which is indefinable. And it's not that we can't talk about
I
trends
drop all
and
these like
livelihoods.
Jungian words, and I don't even know what I mean by that.
Here's an alternate theory.
Okay.
The person that you're listening to has already told you that they worry about sounding pretentious when they're talking about their own art.
And their friend did too.
If a person is worried about sounding pretentious or worried about sounding any kind of a way, they are then going to be monitoring and censoring their own communication in an effort to avoid sounding pretentious or whatever thing they're trying to avoid, which makes that communication less authentic and more stilted and certainly more effortful. It is possible that part of the reason that they have better sales, maybe even the whole reason, but we can never determine that. It is possible that rather than I don't sound as pretentious when I talk about my friend's art, it's possible that I'm much more comfortable talking about how great this art is when it's not mine.
Yeah.
But when it's mine, I'm very uncomfortable talking about how great it is.
Yeah, and instead of making it about him and his own insecurity, he literally made it like a point of advice as though it's like a universal truth.
Right. Because he's and that's not to say that it's not a helpful idea. And you can get, even if, first of all, I could be wrong, he could be right. I mean, this is narrative, this is ex post facto analysis. It's a correlation. We don't know what about them swapping resulted in more sales. But let's say even theoretically that his theory about what it is correct, right? Then it's helpful information to share. Let's say that his theory about why it was helpful is incorrect. Again, can't actually be known or defined as being, but let's assume that it was. Then the advice he shares is still potentially helpful, even if he's got the reason for it wrong.
Why? How is it?
Because if it is helpful to sell your friend's art instead of your own, if that results in more sales,
advice, yeah,
then it doesn't really matter if your theory about why is correct or incorrect. The only problem then is if somebody's like, okay, well, I'm not going to swap with a friend and sell their art instead. I am just going to work on being less pretentious. Then it matters if the theory is correct or incorrect.
Can you tell me that it's incorrect?
It is, I can say.
Or you can't prove that it's correct?
None of this can be proven because this is subjective by definition. What is pretentious is subjective, and therefore we cannot prove it. We could have practical conversations about what things are more likely to be seen by others as pretentious than other things, and there's some utility there potentially, but probably not, because if we do that, that's just going to get you into a place where you're now monitoring, am I doing this, or which makes you sound more inauthentic and stilted.
And sometimes awkward, which is also inauthentic and stilted.
Well, I mean, or can be.
Venn diagram.
Sure. So what I would say is that being worried about sounding pretentious could be defined as being pretentious. Because if you're worried about sounding pretentious, that means if you're talking authentically, right? If you're just giving your like off the cuff responses to things and you're worried it sounds pretentious, then what you're worried is the language I use that makes most sense and is most authentic to me is so educated and high level and polysyllabic that other people don't even understand it and think I'm just being pretentious.
Yeah, another thing I worry about, or no, thank you, Brandon. That was great. I really appreciate it.
You know what pretentious means?
I
know how we use it. I don't actually know this. I'm thinking about this right now, but I have a guess about what it means. I could be
pretending
wrong.
To be precocious? I don't know.
I think it just means pretending to be something that you aren't. And that's what I'm guessing. I'm going to look it up and see if I'm right or wrong about that.
Yeah, but now I associate it more with people who
are attempting to impress by affecting greater importance, talent, culture, etc., than is actually possessed.
So that was kind of the next thing I was actually going to say.
So you're pretending that it's cooler or more important or more valuable than you actually believe that it is. And yes, it comes from pretension, the pretense, being false.
Yeah.
So by being authentic, by giving your honest answer, by definition, you are not actually being pretentious. You are not engaging in putting up a pretense. That doesn't mean that people couldn't perceive you as being pretentious. And I don't actually think people typically use that word to mean pretending to be more important or smarter or better in some way than you actually are. I think actually what people are using it to mean is you're trying to make me feel like I'm dumber than you or less valuable than you. It's a comparative thing. It's not that you're pretending to be more than you are, it's that you're saying that you're more than me.
Oh.
I think that's how people use the word.
Yeah, I think it is too. Here's my next thing I'm thinking about. So I guess a facet of being worried about seeming pretentious would be that my inspiration for the art and like what I care about and what it means to me is really deep, but I worry that sharing that makes it seem like I'm assuming that that means it's good art, because it could still be like ugly or boring or poorly constructed, even though I have like a whole narrative and all of that. You know what I mean? Like almost like if you looked at
you're saying that I'm trying to make sure I'm understanding you. You're saying that because you give a big explanation of your intention or your inspiration or whatever it is behind why you made the art, you think that you are implying to people that that means that the art is very valuable, regardless of whether they find the art to be valuable.
Yeah, and not only, valuable, and I would divide value into like the intention and like meaning and what it's communicating, as well as just like beauty and
you ever been at an art fair and walk past somebody's booth and be like, oh, nothing there is interesting or beautiful, or nothing there seems valuable to me, so I better stop and ask the artist about their process?
No.
So I think you can assume that if a person is asking you about your art or about yourself as an artist,
this is my Achilles heel,
that they've already identified that there's something about your art that is intriguing to them.
Oh yeah, because they wouldn't.
Yeah. Notably, no one ever says pretentious if I'm like, I have to take the SAT and it is going to determine the rest of my life, which would be giving it a greater importance than it has. Nobody ever calls that being pretentious.
I'm not following now.
If pretentious
I'm having a lot of fun though.
If by definition pretentious means pretending that something has more importance or value or is greater than it actually is, by pretending that the SAT is more important than it actually is, I'm really stressed about it. Or I'm not stressed about it, but I want to fit in with everybody else, so I'm pretending like I think it's way important when I don't actually think it's really important. By definition, that would be pretentious. But nobody ever says that.
Why?
Because I'm telling you, I think people use the word pretentious when what they mean is you're making me feel, whether you mean to or not, you're making me feel less than in some way. And by calling you pretentious, I'm accusing you of wanting to make me feel less than. I'm saying you're being a jerk because you're trying to make me feel dumb. So in order to avoid getting that response from people, what you would have to do is avoid saying anything that makes them feel dumb or makes them feel like you might think they're dumb or want them to feel dumb, which the things that you say that make people feel dumb, generally, I've been through this a lot, unfortunately. People will often accuse me, not often, it gets less infrequent as time goes on, but I have been accused many times in my life of trying to make other people feel dumb. Aww. Which I don't, but I understand. I learn more and more about how that happens. And I think it happens when two things are true about what you're saying. A, they don't understand it, or at least they feel as though they don't understand it. And B, they believe that what you're saying is meaningful and potentially valuable. Because if somebody's saying a bunch of stuff that I feel like they don't understand, but I think it's garbage, I'm like, okay,
you're like, whatever, walk away from this
gibberish.
Loser.
But if somebody's saying something that to me, I'm like, oh, okay, this definitely sounds like it makes sense, but it doesn't make sense to me. And there are certainly things that are more likely to get that response from people, and that's going to be rarer and more specific and larger words.
Yeah, and I feel like the way I describe stuff has rarer, more specific, and larger words and references that a lot of people either passively know about or slightly know about. And so then I'm like, I want to be more relatable.
Well, the way to be more relatable is definitely to try and figure out the rules about communication. No, the way to be relatable is to relate to somebody. You're already doing it. You're not just spouting off without paying attention to the other person. You're paying attention to them. If they look confused, then you say, does that make sense? Or did you have a question? Or do you know who that is?
Oh, yeah.
Or,
I think that's why I was fixated on the artist statement thing, because that's a thing where I wouldn't know who's going to read it. So I can't like bank on the reading the other human.
So now we're back to that makes the artist statement, in my definition, art. It's a piece of communication intended for non-specific audience members, right? And then everything we've talked about with art still applies. Let's say that you write something that somebody would think of as pretentious, okay? Now you change it in some way that that person would no longer find it to be pretentious. Well, some other person would have found the original to be delightful, and after the change would find it like, oh, you're dumbing it down and speaking down to me.
Yeah.
You don't think I can handle the truth about what you actually think. There is not a way, which is why you just have to go with authenticity.
Yeah.
Because there is no way to write a thing that everybody will like or everybody will interpret it to mean exactly what you want it to mean. So in lieu of all that, we have actually all kinds of incredibly unobservably complex processes that weigh in all our thoughts about how people might interpret things and how they might be impacted by things, and produce for us the best way of phrasing or communicating something that we are capable of coming up with. And all of that stuff happens before you say anything. Your authentic initial response is already the best result of all these processes, taking into account, well, some people might think this word means this thing, and some people might not like it if I do that thing. You've already done that. Whoa. So by trying to intellectually replicate that work, you're just wasting your efforts. You already did your best version of it. But you're also much more likely to end up with something even worse than what you started with.
That was such a good way to incentivize me to say what's on my mind instead of editing. Wow, that was the most compelling incentivizing you've done.
I'm glad. This is why we just keep saying the same.
Is that a thing?
It's incentive.
Okay. Oh, yes.
The incentivize is already the verb version of the noun incentive. So when you have incentivized someone, you gave them incentive.
I think another reason why this was coming up, which this is useful, and I have allergies, I'm not sick. It's the sniffling.
Sorry, you might be right about incentivization in a very esoteric.
Ooh!
Because the process of incentive.
You're looking to the side. You must be thinking.
You're using it as the process of incentivizing someone, which incentive is not the process of incentivizing someone. It's the thing that you gave them. So incentivization would, I guess, be the word for the process of incentivizing? Probably.
I think a thing that I was thinking about is I feel like in the process of trying to figure out what I'm trying to communicate with my art would be to write an artist statement and see what comes out of it. Because sometimes I find that when I actually write something down, I'm like, oh, this does feel like all of these things are coming together.
What is the alternative that you were considering? What's the way to do this that doesn't involve writing down what you're trying to say?
Oh, it's just a bunch of images and ideas floating in my head that almost feel like, what is it called? A manifestation board? Image, what the thing that people do for weddings? What is it called?
The thing that things do, so I think you're conflating two different things.
It's like Pinterest.
Right. There's like a board that people use to plan an event or whatever, where they're putting like the things that inspire them or whatever.
Yeah, what is that called?
I don't remember right now.
Oh, it has such a good
But there's
name.
another thing that I think of as, I don't know if this is correct, but I think of as coming from The Secret, that book, The Secret.
Yeah.
Where that was about, it was a board where you put down all the things you wanted in life. And I think you're conflating these two things.
I think so,
like
too.
A board where you're saying to the universe, this is what
Yeah,
I want.
I'm talking about the first thing, the Pinterest thing.
Okay. Yeah, I don't know.
Inspiration.
Idea board?
I know it's something. I'll probably think of it before the treatments. But anyway, so right now in my brain, it's mostly a series of like images with like a couple words that like is a description. But I feel like writing about it could be so helpful.
In what way?
In like trying to figure out how I would communicate it, but then I could just practice.
Well, that's what I was asking. You're saying, in order to write an artist statement, maybe I should just try to write down what I'm trying to say. And yes, what other way to try and work on an artist statement? What way could you do that doesn't involve writing down what you're trying to say?
Well, I wasn't sure if there was like a framework that would be useful to explore and learn before writing something down. And that's why I was asking Mr. Brandon Bridge Tessers.
But it still would result in you writing down your best attempt.
Yeah, but first it's thinking about it.
For how long?
100 years. Yeah.
I know we're
like... What is the thing called where you get frozen so you don't die? That's going to have to happen. I won't
cryopreservation, cryogenesis.
Because I don't think I'll be alive in 100 years, so I have to be frozen.
You might. Advances in medical technology, who knows?
Honestly, I'm starting to like life so much, I wouldn't mind being alive in 100 years.
Well, that's
theoretically.
Good. Theoretically, that's great. But in 99 years, you might feel differently.
Oh.
You can't plan that much into the future. And we're like doing it in this joking way, and I'm teasing you a little bit because you're laughing about it, and it's fun. But like, yes, this is the thing that everybody gets stuck in is if I just think about it more, then this thing that needs to be done, like this thing that cannot happen until I do it, I'll get there by just thinking about it and not doing it.
Mm-hmm.
And it doesn't, of course, when I say it that way, it sounds like I'm making it sound absurd, but I am accurately describing it just in different language than what you think of it when you're doing that, right? Like, we think of it as, I got to think about it more and eventually I'll do it. But unless you've got like some kind of framework of, I'm going to think about it this much and then I'll do it, or I'm going to go through this process of thinking and then I'll do it, or whatever. If it's just, I'm not ready to do it yet, I have to think about it more. That's indefinite.
I guess the thing with an artist statement is like, I don't even know what the prompts are. Like, is it a combination of
prompts? First of all, I don't know. I just told you, as best I can remember, this is the first time I've ever heard of the statement. It doesn't feel like that. I feel like I've heard it before, but I don't remember. So I would not be the person to tell you what an artist statement is supposed to contain.
But Brandon, you're supposed to be like, what is the thing that you shake and then they answer?
The magic 8-ball? Yeah. Well, this is the thing. So let's back up.
Oh, but technically that's not a good metaphor because you can ask any question and the 8-ball wouldn't know the question because it's just an 8-ball. So no, you're supposed to be an encyclopedia. A compassionate encyclopedia.
A metaphor doesn't equate to the initial thing in all ways, just in some ways. The ways you're attempting that. All right, I want to back up.
Okay.
Because what I said was that initial thought, that first authentic impulse, is already the result of all of your information, all of those things, doing all these processes, putting out your best attempt at something. That does not mean that it will work. It doesn't mean that it's an effective or a good or a successful attempt. It just means it's your best. So continuing to think about it more doesn't do much for you.
Mm-hmm.
But that doesn't mean that what you eventually put out should just be it. You put it out and then you get more information by showing it to other people and getting feedback instead of thinking about it yourself. If there's something in it, if it sounds pretentious, you literally cannot know that because pretentious is about how someone perceives it. So you got to show it to people and get feedback. And if they're like, yeah, this sounds pretentious, then you'll know it sounds pretentious to at least some number of people. So you write it and show it to people. I don't know what the prompts are. You don't either. I don't think that there are specific prompts. That's my guess.
I guess when I've read like bios on super artsy portfolio websites of people who I enjoy their art, it's usually some combination of an actual bio and then like the things that inspire them.
Cool. That doesn't mean it's the right way to do it. Doesn't mean it's not the right way. You can mimic and follow other people's formulas or patterns or formats, or you can just do your own. Or there is all of this really is just different ways of talking about and coming back to. You just have to identify what is the like likeliest to succeed thing you can come up with, attempt it, observe what happens, and then adjust accordingly. If it's successful, cool, move on or repeat for further success. If it's unsuccessful, you take the information specific to whatever happened and modify your attempt and try it again if it's something you can try a second time. So again, it's really just about evaluating the stakes. Like,
and the stakes are essentially 0.
No. The stakes are specific to the context. If you were telling me
if
right
I write
now,
it in a Google Doc and I only share it with you and maybe a couple friends,
that is very low stakes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Super low.
If you were coming to me and saying, "Look, I've been asked to submit an application for this award. I was nominated for an artist's award, and I have to fill out this form."
Those are higher stakes.
Then that's a very different. I wouldn't just say like, "Yeah, just put down whatever your first thought is and send it in and get feedback from them," because that's higher stakes.
And you could lose by then.
Well, sure.
You might not even get feedback.
I just mean write it down and send it to some of your friends and family and get their feedback, because that's low stakes, and go through that process and then put whatever results from that down and send it in to them. This is the point of practice, right? Like, all right, this is legit. One of the things that I think has almost fundamentally been broken in our culture by the nature of our academic system, which is not, I want to be so clear because people think that I'm like saying teachers suck and stuff. Our academic system,
teachers
I do.
So much. And you are
wife
a
is
teacher.
I was a teacher when I met her. Like,
Yeah.
I still love
And
to teach.
she's an
even though it's not my
amazing
profession.
teacher.
Our academic system, our educational system is incredible. I'm not saying it should go away. It's the best that's ever existed on
Not
this
Germany?
scale. On this scale.
Okay, fine, this scale. Meh, 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 meh.
I did say on this scale. Of course, there are ways of educating someone that's like 1-to-1 that's going to be a lot more effective. But the nature of our system is that it has to work for like tens of millions of children across a very wide and diverse landscape, geographically, culturally, all these different things.
Yeah.
It's super valuable. And like all things, it has its limitations and its costs and whatever. The point of academics is that what we're doing doesn't matter. That's what makes it an academic point, is that it is not at this moment that we're doing it directly relevant to anything happening in front of us. Does that make sense? Like,
Yeah.
I'm learning how to do multiplication in an environment in which that multiplication does not have any real impact on any of the things in my life. That's the point, is we've set this time aside because we can practice it in a low stakes environment, right? If you make a mistake here, it doesn't matter, because the most effective learning involves the most frequent attempts, lowest cost attempts. You just try and try and try and try. And every time you get it wrong, you try again. And every time you get it right, you try again. If one person is trying to learn how to shoot free throws and they shoot 100 free throws, and if they miss one, they just shoot and they take in the data and then they shoot another one right away, and they shoot 100 free throws in an hour, versus somebody else who's trying to learn to shoot free throws and they take 5 minutes before they take a shot thinking about how important it is, and if they miss, they just feel miserable and it's so hard for them to get to do, and they do 3 shots in an hour. Which one of those learns faster, right? So the whole point of the academic environment is that we're teaching you things that don't matter right now. We're attempting to teach you things that we do believe will matter or are likely to matter for real reasons later on. But instead of having to learn and figure those things out then, when there are some actual stakes to it, when your life will actually be better or worse based on whether you do this thing, we're doing it now, where you can just attempt, get it wrong, attempt again, right?
Correct.
The problem then is that because we are doing something where we are intrinsically, by definition, we're taking something, removing it from the context in which it actually matters to a person's life and trying to teach it to them, attentional processes are not prioritizing that thing very much because it's not relevant, right? So even if a student like wants to be a good student and whatever, there's still no inherent reason for them to pay attention to the thing that you're trying to teach them. Even if they do learn it, and this happens all, like we all have learned so many things that we learned outside of the context, and therefore we learn it in a very shallow way. We don't really understand it. It's just rote memorization because we don't know, there's no context to connect it to, right? So then we have to come up with other ways to incentivize people's attentional processes to spend resources on learning this thing.
Mm-hmm.
And there are different ways to do that, but the lowest common denominator, the one that's the most universal, and this is true of like pretty much everything, is you harm people if they don't do it, right?
Mm. Yeah.
You can reward people if they do it, and that also has a very like high success rate, but it's not as universal as harming somebody if they don't do it. So we have grades.
Yeah.
That's what we came up with. Not just feedback that helps you to learn and grow, but like if we actually optimized our educational system to be the best for learning,
Mm-hmm.
then we would have people repeat the same things over and over. Not like you take this test one time and whatever you get, that's the score that goes forward. You would take it, you'd get the feedback on what you got right and what you got wrong. You'd practice and learn some stuff and take it again and you'd get better at it.
Mm-hmm.
But we're balancing two different things in our education system now. Originally it was, we're just trying to teach you stuff we think will help you in the future.
Mm-hmm.
Then we had to tack on, okay, and we have to incentivize you to actually pay attention and engage with this. And there's better ways to do it. The best is to make it engaging and enjoyable. But that's difficult, especially at scale. Doesn't matter what thing you're talking about. You cannot design it. You cannot design a way to teach it that will be enjoyable to 50 million kids. So when we're talking about scale, we have to then resort to something that's universal. And universal is, if you don't do this, you'll get a bad grade and everyone will think less of you. Then over time, that system then starts to get used in ways that is now the main function of that system is to dictate university admissions. But that also made sense. If we have a university and we only have so many buildings and so many professors and so much whatever, and 2,000 people want to come here and we can only fit 400, we have to have some way to determine which 400 we bring in and which we don't. And we have to come up with, you could do that randomly by lottery, but it's rational to think like, well, let's try and evaluate who we think would be most benefited by it or who would be the best fit for it.
Mm-hmm.
And it's natural if you have an entire school system that's very similar to what you're doing at the university level is also academics. It would make sense to look at, well, let's see how you've done in academics. Because if you're a person who doesn't do so well with academics, then this is probably not a good fit for you.
Mm-hmm.
All of it all makes sense when it's developed, and then it just changes and changes. And now at this point, it is treated as the primary function of education at a certain level. People, I think on the elementary school level, there are many people who still are thinking of it and treating it as though this dictates university admissions, which dictates career prospects and success and happiness.
Elementary school?
Mm-hmm. I
thought that was like middle school.
Oh,
wow.
No. Well, so this is what I'm saying is at the high school level, pretty much everybody prioritizes. That's the whole point.
Oh, okay. At
middle school, it's fewer, and elementary school is fewer. And I wouldn't even say that most people prioritize it that way, but it's still plenty. And even those of us who don't prioritize it that way, it's like with all underlying premises, it's really pretty impossible to dictate like what my thoughts and feelings and responses, like what element of those things is influenced by some like belief that this dictates how good somebody is at a thing or how they will perform at some future thing.
Yeah.
But no, parents are obsessed with things like, oh, my kid isn't walking at the age that they most typically walk at, which doesn't make those bad parents. That's something, again, it makes sense to pay attention to because it might indicate that there is something going on that's worth looking at or supporting the child in some way. But it's real fuzzy and it bleeds very much into like my kid won't do as well at things. And anyway, what we want to do is try in a low stakes environment. That's how learning works best. You ideate, execute as rapidly as you can. Come up with your idea of what you're going to try it, see how it goes. Take that information, come up with a new idea of what to try it, see how it goes. The faster you cycle that, the more you learn. And in order to do that, we need the stakes low. If the stakes are high, I cannot just come up with a quick off the cuff attempt and idea and execute and try. So by incentivizing people through grades, we have broken this fundamental premise about learning. And now everybody, especially if you are more successful in academics, a lot of this gets jokingly and seriously referred to as like former gifted kid syndrome or whatever. But if you're successful in that environment, you get a lot of feedback about how important it is to continue to be successful in that environment. So all the things that make a person successful in that environment get reinforced and reinforced. And then you get out into the real world where it's a different thing. And there's just some mismatches. It doesn't make you terrible. Like being good at school doesn't make you worse at life. But it does reinforce some things like if I intellectually understand something, that's the key to succeeding. Because the point in academics is, theoretically anyway, to the extent that it is possible, we are designing it so that if you understand a thing, you get success. Obviously, there is execution involved in order to demonstrate your understanding, but we're trying to make it so that the execution that you need to do to demonstrate your understanding is as out of the way as possible. If we could tap directly into your brain and see whether you understand it, we would. And that, results in adults who think that the solution to every problem is to understand it and then demonstrate that understanding. Including silly things like, you really hurt my feelings, right? And that makes you feel bad. And in response, it's, I understand that I really hurt your feelings, as though that's supposed to undo it. It's an actual thing that people do all the time. Like, how often?
Wait, isn't that part of your like listening exercises you do? Or is it I'm hearing that you?
You're talking about hearing people?
Yeah.
No, that's not about understanding. That's about verbatim saying other. That's the opposite of understanding. Don't try to understand. Just try to say back to them what you heard them say. It's a specific exercise, because when you're focused on understanding, if you ask me how I'm doing and I say not bad, if you ask me how I'm doing, I say I'm fine. The understanding of those two things is more or less the same. You know, the state that I'm in is. Those answers both indicate about the same thing, right? So if you focus on understanding, it disincentivizes you from actually listening to what the person's actually said, because you're just trying to understand what they're communicating to. You don't hear their question, you're trying to understand why they're asking the question and where they want to go. It breaks communication. So,
I'm honestly so happy to hear more of your thoughts about the educational system, because I've wanted to for a while. So thank you, Brandon Tussers.
Well, I'm glad. I really do think that things which are common are commonly useful. Like there are exceptions to this, because if you have the power to make something be more common than it is actually useful, that's the point of what power is, right? Like if it's useful to me, I can make it very common if I'm super powerful.
Or if you think it'll be useful for, oh yes, it's the same thing. Okay.
But on the flip side, if I have very little power but it's useful to me, I will spread it as genuine, like good faith, trying to help other people. So the more common something is, the more likely it is to be helpful commonly in some way. And mostly it is just about limitations. If you give me a hammer and tell me it's a good tool, I believe you, because it is a good tool. But if I misinterpret what you're saying and think that that means that this is the only tool, and then I need to cut a piece of wood in half and I use the hammer to try and do it, it is not going to go well for me. And then I'm going to come back to you and say, how dare you tell me this is a good tool? This is a terrible tool. And the truth is, it's a good tool for a thing. And we just didn't communicate about that. I have some really great, what I think of as really great metaphors to explain a lot of like how people are viewing what generally we will call mental health, and how things have like started to stratify into people who are saying everybody's just whining and making problems bigger than they really are, and then people who are saying no, there's no, this is purely biological and there's nothing any of us can do about it, and it's out of our control completely.
Oh, but those are the two categories?
The two sides to the fight. Some people are saying like,
Both
oh,
of them
everybody's
sound
pretending to
so
be depressed.
unhelpful.
Well, they are, but also both of them are very helpful in some ways.
Oh, yes.
The truth is in the middle. And so point is, if you tell people, if you communicate to someone this is a good tool without being specific about what it's for, they're going to use it for something that it's not good for.
Mm-hmm.
And then they're going to come back to you and tell you it's a bad tool.
Mm-hmm.
And the DSM is a useful tool. It's not a terrible document. It's useful for the specific thing that it is meant to do. When you try and use it for a different thing, when you try and use disorders, diagnoses, as though they are different than what they are meant to be used for. Well, I shouldn't say meant, because sometimes we mean something to be used in a certain way, and it's not so great for that, but it's still great for other things. Whatever.
We as in the creators of the DSM.
No, we as in people, right? Like, even if the creators of the DSM meant for it to be used in a way in which it is unhelpful, that doesn't remove the fact that it is helpful being used in the way that it is helpful to use it. Try and get any kind of insurance coverage for any kind of anything that isn't purely medical without the DSM. It's a very useful tool for that. But it's not useful for looking at and addressing things as though they are diseases, because disorders aren't, and that's not a stigma thing. Whatever. We got to get wrapping up. But point is, here's effective learning. Come up with your idea of what to try it as quickly as possible, observe, get information, including feedback about how that attempt went, roll that into your new idea of what to try again. Cycle that as fast as possible. So anything that helps us to go through more of those cycles quicker makes learning faster and achieves better outcomes over time, if you can keep repeating it. Because we want it to not just be fast, but also sustainable, so you can keep going, right?
I know, I heard that, and I was like, I'm canceling my whole week, and all I'm doing is writing an artist statement.
Yeah, if one attempt precludes your ability to make any more attempts, it doesn't matter how fast or
I won't eat for 72 hours.
So anything that incentivizes that or enables that to do more cycles, more quickly, more sustainably is good for learning. And one of those things that's super important is making it as low stakes as possible. Feeling very strongly about something, in particular, feeling very badly about a failed attempt, raises the stakes and makes it so that you learn less.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, sorry, I want to talk about this a lot. I'm getting carried away, but we got to get wrapped up. What are you thinking?
Why did you say sorry? I'm so sad to hear you say sorry.
I don't know. That's a good point, I guess.
You don't like the sorry stuff
Yeah,
you do.
I don't know. I was just kind of doing a whole thing there at the end. I was trying to like get it going quickly, and I felt like we came off of the artist thing. That's what I was referring to. But you're right. I appreciate the feedback.
Yeah.
Did you just hear
What
me
was
say
your
you're
question?
right?
Oh yeah, sorry. This happens like once every quarter. This is my summer. You're right.
No, this is a thing I'm doing because I know from my perspective that I tell people all the time things like "you're right" or "good point" or "I hadn't considered that," or a lot of the time I don't say anything. I'll just be like, "huh," and then it impacts my thinking, and I move on and add on to it. And I am aware that that does not get perceived by people, so I'm trying to, after taking feedback from people, I'm trying to make a bigger, like, stop everything. I'm saying you're right so that it gets perceived instead of just like, oh, you're right, and we move along and then it doesn't get noticed. I say you're right a lot more.
I'm getting so stuck now in the you're right thing because I would rather have it be like, what you just said is useful to me because I'm probably not right and you're probably not right.
Sure, but that term has practical usage.
It does. It's faster.
But fundamentally I agree with you, which is why a lot of the time when someone makes a good point, it just impacts my thinking, and then I build off of it and respond to it without calling it out. But that has resulted in people thinking that I don't ever think that they have things of value. So I'm trying to make a point of communicating it, not only saying it out loud, but like, stop the presses, everybody, slow down, stop. This is a feedback and advice I have gotten from people. Like, I want to make it clear that you just heard me say that, so that you don't end up thinking I only say it once every 3 months. Because I say it more than that, but I understand that it doesn't get heard and remembered very frequently. So I'm trying to change the rate at which it gets heard.
And then did you ask me a question? What are you thinking?
I don't know, probably.
I'm thinking so many things. I like this fidget. It's fun.
Yeah.
I don't like the way it looks, but I like the way it feels. And this is my beta testing. I tried.
Let me see. I like that too. I mean, I like the glazed side much better than the.
Yeah, I actually like
glazed?
raw, I guess.
Some
I actually
people would
like the
this
raw
texture
size
more.
better.
I think you'd want to like get rid of the little, the protruding pieces that feel like they could. You do? It feels like it's sharp, like you could get hurt.
I know that's one of the things. I'm gonna have to try to make it very smooth. But yeah, I like actually the front part because there are a couple of bare parts and then this shiny.
It's cool. We gotta go. I'm late for a session.
This was so lovely.
It's good to be with you.
Yeah.
It's good to be with all of you.
And peace be with you.
Goodbye.